Picture this. You've spent months, maybe even years, right, studying English.
Oh, yeah, the classic grind.
Exactly. You've memorized all those vocabulary lists, you've conquered the grammar workbooks, and you know the exact difference between, like, the past perfect and the present continuous. You are prepared.
You're ready for anything.
Right. But then it happens. You step into a coffee shop, or maybe you log onto a Zoom call, and a native speaker turns to you and casually says hello. Suddenly, every single word you've ever learned just evaporates.
Your mind just goes completely blank.
You freeze. Your brain completely short circuits, and you end up blurring out that one stiff, robotic textbook phrase you learned on day one. I mean, you know the one.
I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?
Yes, it is so painful.
It is the universal language learner's nightmare. I mean, your mental hard drive just crashes the exact moment actual human contact is involved.
Well, today we are tearing up that textbook. We have spent the week navigating an absolute behemoth of a resource, the BBC Learning English YouTube channel.
Behemoth is the right word.
Right. We're talking about 10.5 million subscribers and over 4,300 videos. They publish new tutorials, shorts, live classes like every single week.
Which is amazing, but also
Totally overwhelming. With a library that massive, it's incredibly intimidating to know where to even begin. So we are building you a curated roadmap out of that robotic English today.
a way to finally ditch the textbook sound.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to figure out how to replace those stiff expressions with natural fluency, conquer the actual mechanics of speaking anxiety, and master those tricky pronunciation rules that trip up even advanced learners.
Because the foundational problem we have to look at first is the very real divergence between what we study in a controlled environment and how people actually speak in the wild.
Right,
You know,
right.
you cannot start speaking confidently until you understand the mechanics of real-world interaction.
And the channel makes a very clear distinction here between, like, textbook English and real English. They actually hosted a 32-minute live class dedicated entirely to that question.
Do you speak textbook English or real English?
Yes, that one. And it frames almost everything else they teach. We see this play out in a hugely popular video featuring their presenter, Cian, titled, Stop Saying, How Are You?
Yeah.
7 more natural phrases to use.
Which is funny because from a purely grammatical standpoint, how are you is perfectly fine.
Right, there's nothing wrong with it structurally.
Exactly. Textbooks rely on it because it's structurally unambiguous. It teaches that subject-verb inversion really clearly, but applying that rigid structure to every single daily interaction is precisely what creates that robotic, unnatural tone.
It just sounds so stiff.
Yeah. Cian's video targets how to initiate informal conversations naturally, but the channel extends this philosophy much further. They actually break down real English into hyper-specific daily scenarios.
Oh, through that whole series called Real Easy English, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
they function as situational conversational scripts. Rather than just studying a random list of verbs, you are studying the vocabulary ecosystem of a specific scenario.
Which makes so much sense. For casual alternatives to use with friends, they have episodes like talking about lunch or are you a tidy or messy person?
And what are you doing this summer?
Yeah, exactly. But then if you're in a professional setting where talking about your messy bedroom isn't exactly going to help you, they pivot.
Right, they switch to tailored content, like their episodes specifically focused on talking about meetings.
It essentially forces you to compartmentalize the language into functional blocks based on the environment. You're internalizing the distinct vocabulary of a business meeting versus, the vocabulary of a summer barbecue.
Which are very different vocabularies.
Completely. And it makes me think about how we approach learning in general. Like, learning English entirely from a grammar textbook is basically like learning to swim by lying on your living room floor.
Just reading a manual about water displacement.
Exactly. You can memorize the strokes, you can understand the physical theory of buoyancy, but the second you jump into the actual pool...
All that dry land theory goes out the window.
Totally. Or, say, the second you sit down for the scenario they cover in their video English conversation at the dinner table, the theory is useless. The temperature is different. The currents are moving. People are interrupting each other.
Chaotic.
Yeah. So, looking at all these hyper-specific scenario videos, it seems like context-like, the difference between the formal meeting and the casual lunch is actually the core mechanism of fluency. So, why is that context so critical?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, fluency is fundamentally misunderstood by most learners.
Also,
The assumption is that fluency means possessing a massive internal dictionary and just deploying flawless grammar.
yeah.
But in reality, true fluency relies heavily on social agility.
Social agility. Unpack that a bit for me.
So social agility is the mechanical ability to read a room and adjust your register. It's knowing how to calibrate your tone, your pacing, and your vocabulary choices based on the specific environment.
To genuinely connect with the person in front of you.
Precisely. When you use a highly formal textbook phrase like, "How are you doing today, sir?" with a close friend, you aren't making a grammatical error.
But it feels weird.
Right, because you are accidentally creating social distance. You're subconsciously signaling, we are not close.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, so when the BBC channel teaches you how to replace those stiff greetings with natural phrases suited for specific contexts, they are teaching you how to close that social distance.
They're teaching the social agility required to be human in another language, rather than just being a highly accurate machine.
Exactly. You aren't just trying to be correct. You're trying to calibrate your relationship with the listener.
That is a fascinating pivot. But, I mean, there is a massive catch to all of this.
Oh, definitely.
Because even if you study Scene's video and you memorize all 7 of those natural phrases and you master the exact vocabulary for a corporate meeting, none of it matters if you are too paralyzed by fear to actually open your mouth.
Right. The psychological barrier often completely overrides all that cognitive preparation.
Which is something the channel tackles directly. They have this entire video series called Beating Speaking Anxiety, led by their presenters, Georgie and Hanan.
And they address these highly relatable, terrifying moments for anyone speaking a second language in public.
Yeah, there are videos titled Help, What to Do When You Don't Understand People, and my absolute personal favorite, Do This When Your Mind Goes Blank.
What really stands out about Georgie and Hanan's approach is their refusal to rely on empty platitudes.
Right, there's no just take a deep breath and believe in yourself.
Exactly. They avoid all that standard advice. Instead, they bring in experts to explain the actual biological mechanics of what is happening in your brain when you try to speak English under pressure.
They look closely at the neurological response to the stress of speaking a foreign language.
Synthesizing this into a practical philosophy, which is perfectly captured by one of their video titles. Feel the fear and speak English anyway.
And I gotta say, feel the fear and do it anyway is a great sentiment, but it sounds a bit like a motivational poster.
It does sound a bit cliche at first.
Right, because when you are standing in front of a group of native speakers and they are waiting for you to finish your sentence and your mind goes completely blank, that fear is an intensely physical sensation.
Oh, absolutely. Your heart rate spikes.
Your palms sweat, your throat literally tightens. Telling someone in that state to just speak with less stress feels like telling someone in a burning building to just relax and enjoy the warmth.
That's a great way to put it.
So I'm guessing that understanding the brain science doesn't actually stop the physical panic. But why is it such an effective language learning tool? Does it just reframe it so you don't instantly spiral into self-loathing?
That is exactly the mechanism at play. Knowing the brain science doesn't magically lower your heart rate, but it fundamentally alters your interpretation of those physical symptoms.
Okay, how so?
When your mind goes blank and you freeze, the immediate instinct for most learners is extreme self-blame. The internal monologue becomes, I haven't studied enough. I am terrible at this language.
You internalize that freeze as a personal intellectual failure.
Right. But by bringing in experts to explain the brain science, Georgie and Hannon are objectifying the fear.
Objectifying it, so making it a biological event rather than a character flaw.
Precisely. They explain that your mind going blank is not a failure of your English proficiency. It's actually a successful, highly predictable biological response from a brain under perceived threat.
A threat. just from talking.
Well, evolutionarily, social rejection was dangerous. When you feel judged by native speakers, your amygdala fires, engaging your fight or flight response.
Oh, wow. So your brain is literally treating it like a life or death
Yeah,
situation.
your brain floods with cortisol, which temporarily shuts down access to the hippocampus and your higher order cognitive functions like recalling complex foreign vocabulary.
So it can focus entirely on immediate survival.
Exactly. The brain locks the filing cabinet containing your English words because it essentially thinks you are being hunted.
That is wild. So the system is actually working perfectly. It's just reacting to the wrong kind of threat.
Yes. And by understanding that this is purely a biological brain response, learners can detach their self-worth from the panic.
You can observe the sensation and think, my heart is racing and I forgot the word for lunch because my amygdala is overreacting, not because my English is poor.
Exactly. Once you remove that heavy layer of shame and self-blame, the fear just becomes a manageable physical sensation that you are observing.
And that emotional detachment is what finally allows you to utilize the practical confidence building tips that the channel provides.
Because you cannot access those tools if you are drowning in shame. Understanding the science neutralizes the shame.
It clears the cognitive interference so the language can actually flow.
Right.
Which brings us to the final hurdle. Once we've unlatched that mental filing cabinet and the words are ready to come out, we hit the most granular layer.
The mechanics of sounding natural.
Yes. Refining the physical sounds and the tiny grammar nuances that routinely trip up even the bravest learners. And English is incredibly opaque in this department.
Oh, the phonetic complexity of the language is just staggering.
The channel actually has a comprehensive course teaching all 44 sounds in the English language. And then they have a short video focused on what has to be the most diabolical spelling grouping in the entire language.
I think I know the one you mean.
The title asks, through, though, thought, although thorough, can you pronounce these 5 English words?
The infamous OUGH words.
They are a nightmare.
On paper, they look almost identical, but they map to entirely different vowel and consonant sounds. It highlights a massive hurdle. English orthography, the spelling system, is completely divorced from its phonetic reality.
Totally divorced. But beyond those notorious tongue twisters, there is one specific concept regarding pronunciation that fundamentally changes how you hear the language.
The schwa.
Yes, the channel dedicated an entire 35-minute live class to this single concept. The stream was titled Schwa, Improve Your Fluency with the Most Common Sound in English.
And it really is the most frequently used sound in the English language, and yet most native speakers couldn't even define it for you.
It's that lazy, relaxed sound, right?
Yeah, you hear it as the A in about, the E in water, or the O in doctor.
But why is it so important? Because a lot of learners assume that sounding fluent means perfectly enunciating every single syllable of every single word.
But if you do that in English, you end up sounding completely robotic. What the BBC channel emphasizes so heavily is that the schwa isn't just a quirky vowel. It is the mechanical engine of English fluency.
Let's break down why that is.
Well, because English is what linguists call a stress-timed language. In syllable-time languages, like Spanish or French, each syllable generally gets an equal amount of time and weight.
But English doesn't work that way.
Not at all. English rhythm is determined by the stressed syllables. The amount of time it takes to say a sentence depends on the number of stressed words, the important nouns and verbs, not the total number of syllables.
So to maintain that specific rhythmic heartbeat of the language, native speakers actually have to rush through the less important syllables.
Yes, and that is where the schwa comes in.
I like to think of it like the suspension system in a car. The stressed nouns and verbs are the heavy frame of the vehicle, and the unstressed syllables are the bumps in the road.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Because if you hit every bump with a stiff, perfectly enunciated vowel, the whole ride is jarring and mechanical, but the schwa absorbs the impact.
It really does. The physical articulation of the schwa requires almost zero muscular effort. Your tongue is just completely relaxed in the middle of your mouth.
It allows the speaker to glide effortlessly over the unimportant words so they can land heavily on the words that actually carry meaning.
That suspension system analogy is perfect. When you force yourself to perfectly pronounce the O in doctor or the A in about, you are stiffening the suspension. You break the stress-timed rhythm.
And mastering the schwa allows you to compress the language the way native speakers do, instantly transforming your speech pattern from mechanical to fluid.
What's fascinating here is that the channel applies this same level of microanalysis to grammar, too, particularly with prepositions.
Oh, prepositions. They have a massive playlist dedicated entirely to them.
They're so tricky.
They really are. They have a short on the difference between arrive in versus arrive at. They have another breakdown beside versus besides. And then that highly confusing three-way split. Graduate from versus graduate in versus graduate with.
Prepositions are notoriously difficult because they almost never translate directly across languages. They aren't just vocabulary words.
What are they then?
They're reflections of how a specific culture physically maps space and time.
Explain that spatial mapping. Like, why is arrive in different from arrive at mechanically?
It comes down to how English visualizes boundaries.
Yeah.
We use in when we conceptualize something as a container or an enclosed space with borders.
Like a city or a country.
Right. You arrive in London or in France because you are crossing a geographical boundary into a container. We use at when we conceptualize something as a specific one-dimensional point on a map or a timeline.
So you arrive at the airport or at 5:00 p.m.
Exactly. The confusion happens because a learner's native language might not differentiate between a container and a point on a map. They might use a single spatial marker for both.
So if you try to map your native spatial reasoning onto English prepositions, the system completely breaks down.
It does.
That makes total sense. It's a completely different way of visualizing geometry. And it highlights how counterintuitive language learning can be at the advanced stages. Like, learners naturally gravitate toward memorizing massive $10 words to sound more intelligent.
But this source material proves that sounding natural doesn't come from a complex vocabulary.
It comes from mastering the smallest, most invisible elements of the language, like compressing your syllables with the schwa and visualizing space correctly to use the right preposition.
The macro effect of fluency is entirely built on those micro details. Using a highly sophisticated verb won't mask the fact that you used the wrong preposition.
It instantly breaks the illusion of fluency for a native ear.
Exactly. By focusing on these granular mechanics, the BBC channel is handing learners the specific levers to pull to sound authentic.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today by navigating through thousands of videos to find these core strategies.
We really have.
By approaching a resource like the BBC Learning English channel strategically, you now have a clear, actionable roadmap. You can step away from the robotic textbook greetings and utilize the specific scripts required for a professional meeting or a casual lunch.
You can examine the brain science behind your speaking anxiety.
Reframing your fear as an evolutionary biological response rather than a personal failure. And you can polish the physical rhythm of your speech by mastering the stress-timed mechanics of the schwa and the spatial reasoning of prepositions.
It really cuts through the overwhelm of all 4,300 videos.
So what does this all mean?
Well, it demonstrates that the mechanics of language, the pronunciation rules, the spatial grammar, the situational vocabulary, they're ultimately just tools. The final and perhaps most profound takeaway can be drawn from one of the channel's specific playlists titled English for Entertainment.
That playlist caught my eye. It features videos like Why Do People Like Sad Music and The Art of Conversation.
Those titles hint at the actual end game of all this effort. I mean, why are we doing this work? Why study the mechanics of the schwa or stress over the geometry of arrive in versus arrive at or fight through those cortisol spikes of public speaking?
Right. What's the point of it all?
The ultimate goal of learning English isn't merely to survive a corporate business meeting or to execute flawless grammar on a test. True fluency is reaching the point where the mechanics become invisible to you.
when you don't even have to think about them anymore.
Exactly. Fluency is achieved when you can stop consciously managing the tools long enough to use the language as a bridge. It's when you can use English to explore deep, complex human experiences, like debating the psychological pull of sad music with a new friend or analyzing the nuances of a film.
That is the moment the language ceases to be a textbook subject you are observing and becomes a living, breathing extension of your authentic self.
It transforms from an academic exercise into a new lens for interacting with the world.
I love that. So the next time you step into a coffee shop and a native speaker casually says hello, remember, you don't have to rely on the textbook robot. You understand the social agility of the interaction. You know the science of your own amygdala, and you have the mechanical tools to keep the rhythm smooth. Take a breath, let the schwa absorb the impact, and just be yourself. Until next time, keep exploring.